Have you been thinking about going on a solo trip, but the thought of it scares you? Don't worry, I got you. I'm currently sat in a random park in Bern on the tail end of my solo trip in Switzerland, and I've just been reflecting on the last couple of days I spent here. Before I booked this trip, I genuinely had no idea what I was getting myself into. But from this experience, I've learned so much, so I figured why not share it with you? Just in case you're also on the fence about going on a solo trip and you have no idea how to start planning one, here's a step-by-step guide of how to book your first ever solo trip. Before you even start planning the trip, you first need to figure out what type of trip you want this to be. What's your intention behind this trip? What kind of person are you? What type of interests do you have? And the reason I say this is because there's no point picking a destination without knowing what you're going to get up to at that place, especially if you're going to be on your own. Say if you're more of an art geek, then you probably want to pick a place that has a ton of art museums or really pretty architecture that you can enjoy. Or if you're more of a foodie, you probably want to head somewhere that has a ton of great restaurant recommendations. Or even if you're someone who wants to go on a solo trip because you want to make new friends, then you probably want to head to a city that has a ton of young energy. For me personally, I love being outside and I love the outdoors, so I knew I wanted it to be some sort of hiking trip. Knowing that helped me narrow down my search, which brings me to my next point. Once you've set your intention for this trip, you'll probably soon realize that there are a couple of different destinations that you could head to. Going back to the art example, you'll probably realize that places like France or Italy have great art museums. And then you can start to narrow down what specifically within art that you enjoy. Are you a fan of Impressionism? Is there a specific artist whose work you really enjoy? It all depends on your interests. For me personally, I know that as much as I love being outside, some of my favorite hikes I've ever done have always been lakes surrounded by mountains. That's something I really, really love. And whenever I've done those hikes, I've always felt very at peace. So of course, I started looking into places that would have both of those things. I initially started looking at Switzerland because I've heard it is an extremely beautiful place. But like I said, because I knew specifically I wanted to do hikes that involved both mountains and lakes, that helped me narrow down my search within Switzerland quite quickly, which is how I ended up in Kennersteg, one of the towns within the Swiss Alps. Now that you have your destination, it's time to figure out how long you want to go for. Are there specific musts you have to do in the place you're visiting? If so, how long will that take? I knew that if I were to go on a hiking trip, ideally I want to do at least 3 hikes. So for me, it kind of made sense to do a trip that was 4 days, 3 nights. Depending on how long it's going to take you to travel to your destination, you could also factor that in. Bear in mind, a solo trip doesn't have to be super long. It can even just be an overnight stay, especially if the place you're staying is super quaint and the town really small. What matters most is that you get to spend the time you have there however you want. I feel like in any trip, whether solo traveling or with other people, you're definitely going to have to compromise on some things. And it's entirely up to you to figure out what those things are. I know for most people, hostels are a really great option, especially when solo traveling. But for me, this was something that I was not willing to compromise on. I knew going to my first solo trip that if I had to share a dorm with someone, I would probably be uncomfortable the whole time. Especially because I'm an extremely light sleeper and I need a good night's rest, especially if I'm expecting myself to be hiking. I know that the prices of hotels and hostels are extremely different, but this was something that I was just not willing to sacrifice. I was open to the idea of staying in a hostel as long as I had my own private room and an ensuite, but unfortunately for the place that I was staying, that wasn't really an option. It's either hotels or a dorm shared with 5 other people. On the flip side, I was willing to compromise on the fact that there aren't necessarily good food options in Switzerland, and I was completely okay with that in this circumstance because my priority was to just be outside. So it didn't really matter to me what food options there were as long as I knew that the place that I was staying had a grocery store in town that I could walk to and grab something to eat. All that say, you need to figure out what are some of your non-negotiables when it comes to solo traveling. And it's completely up to you because obviously everyone's different. Now, the last thing to do before you book your accommodation is to do what I like to call boring but necessary research. Ask yourself questions like, does the place I'm going to have reliable transportation? Or do I primarily have to rely on Bolt or Ubers? Or if Bolt and Uber is not a thing there, will I have to get a meter taxi? And if so, is it a place that will accept card or are they predominantly a cash dependent society? If all of these aren't an option, do you need to rent a car? And now regarding your flight, are you arriving on a night flight? Will there be a bus or train that will be able to take you into the city? Or do public transportation shut down at a specific time? Is my accommodation within walking distance to the city center? Are there grocery stores nearby? These questions are super important, especially if you're a solo female traveler. I know some of us can feel like such a hassle to sort these questions out, but I promise you, sorting it out now before you go on your trip is a lot better than being stranded at an airport because the bus you plan on taking was closed down for maintenance and you can't find any other reliable mode of transportation to take you to your hotel that you booked 20 miles out of the city. There is genuinely no better time than the present, and if you've already made it this far through all the research, just book the trip. Don't let your doubts get to you and don't wait around for someone else to join you, because I can promise you, you're going to have the best time and you're going to learn so much about yourself, and this experience is something that no one else can give you, only yourself. For me personally, I'm going to make it a priority to at least go on a solo trip once a year now. I hope at least it inspires you to start thinking about when potentially you might be able to book your first solo trip.